Hello everyone, and welcome to my Starly Solo Challenge. It's been a long time since I've done a non-starter run, and the Discord voted on Starly, so here we are. I have a great feeling about how Starly will do for a few reasons, but we'll explore all of that later. Before we get too far into the video, I'd like you all to know that I'm working really hard to produce a new Pokemon Challenge video every week, so if you like this content, please consider liking and subscribing, as it would really mean a lot to me, and it would help the channel grow. Anyways, let's quickly cover the rules so we can begin. Rule number 1. No glitches, hacks, or cheats. I do, however, use speed up, otherwise these videos would take far longer to produce and I'd rather produce them quickly. Rule number 2. I can only use one Pokemon in battle. However, because I'm not cheating, I do need to use HM Pokemon for travel purposes only. And lastly, rule number 3. No items in battle. This doesn't include held items, as I use Everstones during some runs, and so other held items are also allowed if necessary. With all of that out of the way, let's begin. So, to start off, I should talk about how we're gonna get our Starly. When I do non-starter runs, I actually edit the starter Pokemon themselves so that we can use them for the first battle. Well, that didn't exactly work out this time, so we're going into our first battle with Turtwig, and I'll change it via save editor after the fact. I know, this may invalidate the run for some of you out there, but this method is more accurate to what the average player would do without game or save editing, so one could say that this method is more accurate than what I would have done at first. Either way, I aim to have future non-starter runs function with starter Pokemon replaced, so hopefully that comes to fruition for the next run. As for our first battle with Barry, we simply trade Tackle and Scratch until we win. At this point, I had changed my Turtwig into a Starly, and rest assured, all I changed was the species and the moves to correlate with a level 5 Starly. No stats or anything else were modified. Anyways, I had to reset with Turtwig until I had acquired Adamant Nature, which is something that we need for Starly during this run. With Starly, we're going for a physical attacker, so after we rename our Starly with Professor Rowan and get the return TM from him, we immediately begin our EV training by grinding out 252 Shinx for attack EVs and 252 Starly for speed EVs.
Why? Why did you do this?
To test the limits of my ability.
After a long grind, we head through Jubilife and run into Barry on our way out. Poor Chump has no idea what he's in for. Barry leads with his own Starly, which we subjugate with Return. Barry's last Pokemon is his Chimchar, who we cleave with Aerial Ace. Our next battle is against the first gym leader, Rourke. Rourke leads with his Geodude, who we fracture with a Return. Following the Geodude is Onix, who we also pelt with Return, but sadly we don't knock it out, meaning that we're hit with Rock Throw. On the following turn, Rourke heals up his Onix, but we continue beating it with Return, knocking out Onix after 2 more bombardments. Rourke's last Pokemon is his Cranidos, who we're able to shatter with the last return of the battle. As we're making our way to the next gym challenge, we end up battling against Commander Mars of Team Galactic. Mars leads with her Zubat, who we pulverize with Return. Mars then sends out her last Pokemon, Purugly, who fakes us out to stall for a turn. But then we pummel Purugly with the power of friendship to knock it out. As it turns out, our next gym challenge isn't much of a challenge at all. We're facing off with Gardenia, who has no idea that my Starly has been trained in the art of war. Gardenia leads off with her Turtwig, who is slashed down by our Aerial Ace. Up next is Charum, who is also shredded by our Aerial Ace. Gardenia's last Pokemon is her Roserade, who is chopped up once more by our Aerial Ace. We then find ourselves in a battle against Commander Jupiter of Team Galactic. Much like with Mars, Jupiter isn't so tough. Jupiter leads with her Zubat, who we beat with Return. Jupiter's last Pokemon is her Skuntank, who we also pummel with Return until it stops moving. Back into the gym challenge, our next battle is with Fantina. Fantina leads with her Duskull, who we have to hit with Aerial Ace because all of our other moves are normal type. Thankfully, Aerial Ace is capable of one-shotting Duskull, meaning that the Haunter is sent out next. Much like with Duskull, Haunter is sliced up by Aerial Ace. Fantina's last Pokemon is her Mismagius, who we also slash with Aerial Ace, but Mismagius doesn't go down, hitting us with a Confuse Ray after eating its Citrus Berry. Sadly, we do hit ourselves in our confusion, and Mismagius follows that up with a Psybeam, bringing us down quite low. Unfortunately for Mismagius, we don't hit ourselves on the following turn and manage to land another Aerial Ace, closing out the battle. As we leave Hearthhome, we run into Barry again. Barry has been training a bit, evolving his Starly into his new lead at Staravia. Staravia lowers our attack with Intimidate, but that isn't enough of a debuff to nullify just how swole my bird is, so we batter Staravia with Return and knock it out. Barry's next Pokemon is his Buizel, who we also pummel with Return for a one-shot. Up next is Monferno, who we cleave with Aerial Ace. Following Monferno is Barry's last Pokemon, Roselia, which we also carve up with Aerial Ace. The next challenge we find ourselves faced with is that of Maylene, our 4th gym leader. Maylene leads with her Meditite, who we're able to slash with Aerial Ace for a one-shot. Following the Meditite is Machoke, who was also chopped up by Aerial Ace. Maylene's last Pokemon is her Lucario, who we hit with Aerial Ace for roughly half health, while Lucario retaliates with a Drain Punch, healing up roughly a third of its health and lowering us down to just under half health. On the next turn, though, we're able to land another Aerial Ace to knock out the Lucario. Having arrived at the 5th gym on our list, Barry shows up and stops us from entering. Barry should instead change his name to Barrier. Anyways, Barry leads with his Staravia, which lowers our attack with Intimidate. Once again, we're still too powerful and knock out the Staravia with the power of Friendship. Following Staravia is Buizel, who hits us with Aqua Jet before we clap back with Return for a one-shot. Up next is Monferno, who we hack with Aerial Ace to knock it out. Barry's last Pokemon is his Roselia, who we sliced up like a head of lettuce with Aerial Ace. Wake proved to be more challenging than I first thought he'd be, so we actually had to grind for a bit prior to this battle. Wake leads with his Gyarados, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. We use 6 Double Team while Gyarados misses Waterfall 6 times, and then we finally bludgeon Gyarados with a crit return for a one-shot. Wake then sends out his Floatzel, who we also club with Return, but sadly we don't one-shot and Floatzel eats a Citrus Berry before missing Ice Fang. On the following turn, we knock out the Floatzel with another Return. Wake's last Pokemon is his Quagsire, which we hit with Return while it misses Rock Tomb. On the next turn, we land a crit Return to finish off the Quagsire and win the battle.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Taking a short detour, I decided that I wanted to get a Silk Scarf for later in the run, so I went back to Veilstone's Game Corner to purchase some coins to exchange for the scarf in question. However, while I was there, I also noticed that they had a metronome that I could also exchange coins for, so I grabbed that as well. If you're not sure what either of these items do, the Silk Scarf increases your normal type attacks by 20%, while Metronome increases your attack power by 10% for each consecutive hit, up to 100%. I didn't realize just how important Metronome would be, but I'm so glad that I got it. After our brief shopping in Veilstone, we make our way to Celestic Town and then have our first battle against Cyrus. Cyrus leads with his Sneasel, who we beat down with Return. Following Sneasel is Golbat, who we also batter with Return. Cyrus's last Pokemon is his Murkrow, who also can't handle the sheer force with which we punch it in the forehead with Return. Making our way to the 6th gym, Barry decides that he needs a reminder for how powerful our little birdie is. Barry leads with his Staraptor, who immediately lowers our attack with Intimidate. Staraptor's Intimidation doesn't really accomplish much though, as we're still able to one-shot it with Return. Following the Staraptor is Heracross, who we slice with Aerial Ace to knock it out. Up next is Infernape, who meets the same fate as Heracross. Floatzel is Barry's next Pokemon, who outspeeds us with Aqua Jet before we retaliate with Return for a one-shot. Barry's last Pokemon is his Roserade, who we chop up with Aerial Ace. This next battle with Byron was a huge problem for a while, but since we used the metronome I mentioned earlier, we were able to get by. Byron leads with his Magneton, who we use 3 double teams against while it misses Thunderbolt 3 times. If Thunderbolt hits us at any point, it one-shots us. Finally, we're ready to fight though, beating Magneton with Return for a one-shot. Byron's next Pokemon is his Bastiodon, the absolute unit, who can also one-shot us with Stone Edge. We hit Bastiodon with 8 different returns, dodging everything Bastiodon tries, forcing it to eat its berry, and then having Byron heal it. Finally, it hits us with Metal Burst after missing a ton with Stone Edge. Fortunately, we take down the Bastiodon with 2 more returns after dodging more Stone Edge. Byron's last Pokemon is his Steelix, who we hit with Return for half health, but then it hits us with Ice Fang. Fortunately, we're left with 24 HP, so we can land one last Return and finally move on from Byron. At this point, Team Galactic moves into action across the region, starting by blowing up Lake Valor. We head over to investigate and find Saturn, challenging him to a battle. Saturn leads with his Golbat, who we brutalize with the power of friendship. Following the Golbat is Bronzor, who tanks our return and then uses Iron Defense. However, Bronzor isn't Bastiodon and thus cannot stand to a second return. Saturn's last Pokemon is his Toxicroak, who is absolutely obliterated with a crit return one-shot. We then fly over to deal with Mars, who is giving our distant associates some trouble at Lake Verity. Mars leads with her Golbat, which we discombobulate with Return, knocking it out. Mars then sends out her Bronzor, and sadly we're unable to one-shot this one with Return either. Bronzor then uses Iron Defense, and then we finish it off with another Return. Mars' last Pokemon is her Purugly, who hits us with Fake Out, but we answer that with a devastating Return on the following turn. As we approach Candace, you would probably think that my answer to this fight would be Return like it has been for most of the run. However, since Candace has a Frostless, I decided instead to throw on the Metronome again and go at things a little bit differently. Getting into the fight itself, Candace leads with her Sneasel, which outspeeds us with Ice Shard for about half of our health, but then we slice Sneasel up with Aerial Ace to knock it out. Abomasnow is sent out next, who we also slash with Aerial Ace for a one-shot. Candace then sends out her Pillow-Swine, who we almost knock out with Aerial Ace, but not quite, meaning that Pillow-Swine tries to hit us with Stone Edge. Fortunately, Pillow-Swine misses Stone Edge, and we're able to finish it off on the next turn. Candace's last Pokemon is her Frostless, who we're thankfully able to outspeed and one-shot with Aerial Ace. Returning to Veilstone to confront Team Galactic, Cyrus quickly reminds us all to like, comment, and subscribe to help us in our battle against the YouTube algorithm, and then we find ourselves battling against Cyrus himself. Cyrus leads with his Sneasel, who we bludgeon with Return to knock it out. Cyrus's next Pokemon is his Crobat, who outspeeds us with Air Cutter for a small bit of damage, but we follow up with a Return to take Crobat down. Cyrus's last Pokemon is his Honchkrow, which we beat down with Return to knock it out. Cyrus told us that he didn't care about us letting the Lake Trio go, but Saturn refuses to abide by this and challenges us to a battle. Saturn leads with his Golbat, who we're able to knock out with Return. Bronzor is up next, who tanks our Return and then slaps us with Gyro Ball, which I don't think I've ever seen do that much damage. Anyways, we land another Return and knock out the Bronzor. Saturn's last Pokemon is his Toxicroak, who we pulverize with Return for a one-shot. We trek to Spear Pillar to put a stop to Cyrus's plans, but we're stopped by Mars and Jupiter before we can get to Cyrus. Thankfully, Barry comes along to help us out, though given his battles against us in the past, I'm not sure how useful he can be outside of being a punching bag. Anyways, both Mars and Jupiter lead with Bronzor, who set up Reflect and Light Screen after we pelt Mars's Bronzor with a Return. On the next turn, we use Return again and finish off Mars's Bronzor before being hit by a Gyro Ball from Jupiter's Bronzor. Mars then sends out her Purugly, who we bludgeon with Return for a one-shot, while Bronzor hits Munchlax with an extra sensory. Mars then sends out her Golbat, who we pummel with Return for a one-shot, meaning that Mars is out of Pokemon. Bronzor then uses extra sensory again, but this time Munchlax hits back with a Body Slam for huge damage. On the next turn, we finish off the Bronzor with a Return. Jupiter then sends out her Skuntank, who we slice with Aerial Ace, making it eat a berry before it uses Poison Jab on Munchlax. Munchlax retaliates with a Body Slam, and then we finish off Skuntank with a Return. Jupiter's last Pokemon is her Golbat, who we're almost able to one-shot with Aerial Ace, but not quite, meaning that we're hit with Sludge Bomb while Munchlax screeches. We then finish off the Golbat with another Aerial Ace on the following turn. Cyrus ends up moving forward with his plan, summoning Dialga and Palkia, which in turn upsets the Lake Trio. As Cyrus tries to control the situation, Giratina shows up and shows Cyrus the true meaning of fear. Having made our way through the Distortion world, we finally find Cyrus at the bottom, where we enter into a final battle against him. Cyrus leads with his Houndoom, who we use 3 double teams against while Houndoom misses 3 flamethrowers, and then we brutalize the poor dog with a crit return. Cyrus sends out his Weavile next, who we also beat down with Return. Gyarados is Cyrus's next Pokemon, who unfortunately lowers our attack with Intimidate. We pelt Gyarados with a return, but sadly we don't knock it out, and Gyarados is able to hit us back with an Ice Fang. Cyrus then heals up Gyarados, but we're able to land 2 returns to knock it out. Up next is Honchkrow, who we one-shot with Return. Cyrus's last Pokemon is his Crobat, who outspeeds us with Air Slash but misses, meaning that we can land a return. Sadly, we fall just short of knocking out the Crobat, and then Cyrus heals up Crobat before we can land our Quick Attack. Crobat then thankfully misses Air Slash again, and we're able to land Return, but sadly our Metronome stacks are gone, so we don't do as much damage this time. However, we still have Quick Attack, meaning that we can outspeed Crobat on the next turn to knock it out. We then have a brief encounter with Giratina, who we quickly capture. From there, we head to Sunyshore and begin our last gym battle with Volkner. Volkner leads with his Jolteon, who we're able to outspeed and obliterate with Return. Up next is Raichu, who is also brutalized by Return. Luxray follows the Raichu, needing the same fate. Volkner's last Pokemon is his Electivire, who also falls to the pure power of friendship. Upon arriving at the Elite Four, we're stopped by Barry, who challenges us to one last battle. Barry leads with his Staraptor, which we pelt with Return for a one-shot. Up next is Floatzel, who is also knocked out by a single return. Barry then sends out his Heracross, who we slash with Aerial Ace to take it down. Snorlax is up next, and somehow Starly is just so powerful that not even Snorlax can tank a return. Roserade is sent out next, which is sliced to pieces by Aerial Ace. Barry's last Pokemon is his Infernape, who we one-shot with Aerial Ace. We start off our Elite Four battles with Aaron, probably the strongest Bug-type specialist within all Pokemon games. Aaron leads with his Yanmega, who we're actually able to outspeed in one-shot with Aerial Ace. Aaron's next Pokemon is his Drapion, which we're also able to outspeed with Aerial Ace, however we don't get a one-shot and Drapion eats a Citrus Berry before hitting us back with Ice Fang for almost half health. We then answer with another Aerial Ace and knock out the Drapion. Vespiquen is up next, who we slice with Aerial Ace, knocking it out. Following Vespiquen is Heracross, who we're also able to knock out with Aerial Ace. Aaron's last Pokemon is his Scizor, and surprisingly we're also able to one-shot here as well. Our next Elite Four battle is with Bertha, who gave us a bit of trouble for a long while due to some of her Rock-type Pokemon. Bertha leads with her Whiscash, who is the safest for us to set up our double teams against. We start off with 4 double teams while Whiscash misses 3 Aqua Tail and then sets up a Sandstorm. We then use our 5th and 6th double teams, dodging 2 more Aqua Tails. Finally, we use a Return and one-shot the Whiscash. Up next is Golem, who we hit with Return for roughly half health before it hits us back with Thunder Punch, dropping us down to 43 HP. The Sandstorm then dies down and we knock out the Golem with another Return. Rhyperior is sent out next, who we hit with Return for half health while we dodge a Megahorn. On the next turn, we use another Return, but do slightly less damage this time, being unable to knock it out, and then making Rhyperior eat its berry. Thankfully, we dodge another Megahorn, and then we take down the Rhyperior. Gliscor is sent out next, who we one-shot with Return. Bertha's last Pokemon is her Hippowdon, who we're also able to knock out immediately with Return. Flint is the third of the Elite Four challenge, though I'm not really worried about him. Flint leads with his Houndoom, who we beat down with Return, one-shotting it. Up next is Infernape, who we also bludgeon with Return to knock it out. Following Infernape is Magmortar, who also can't tank our Return and faints. Flareon is up next, which is yet another one-shot with Return. Flint's final Pokemon is his Rapidash, who we hit with one last Return to bring it down. Lucian is the last of the Elite Four standing between us and the champion, and I'm a bit worried about one Pokemon in particular that Lucian has, Bronzong. Lucian leads with his Mr. Mime, who we one-shot with Return. Lucian then sends out his Gallade, and thankfully we're also able to knock out Gallade with a single Return. Alakazam is up next, who we also brutalize with Return. Following the Alakazam is Espeon, who we punt into the Stratosphere with Return. Lucian's last Pokemon is his Bronzong, who I was quite worried about. We pelt Bronzong with Return for massive damage before getting hit with Gyro Ball. Lucian then heals his Bronzong, but we're able to land 2 more Return to ring the bell on this fight. The last challenge of our run is Cynthia, who I was deathly afraid of for the entire run, but well, you'll see. Cynthia leads off with her Spiritomb, who we hit with Aerial Ace for a good chunk before it hits us back with Dark Pulse for roughly a quarter health. We then knock out Spiritomb on the following turn. Following Spiritomb is Togekiss, who we're able to knock out with a high roll return. Up next is Lucario, who we hit with Return for a great deal of health while also dodging Stone Edge. One more Return on the next turn knocks out the Lucario. Cynthia then sends out her Milotic, who we're able to knock out with a single Return, which was a huge surprise. Even more surprising was that we were able to do the same thing to her Garchomp on the next turn. Cynthia's last Pokemon is her Roserade, who we slice up with Aerial Ace for a one-shot. Well, that was certainly something. Going into this run, I was quite worried about Starly's performance, at least until I looked into the stats in the move pool that it had. Naturally, learning Double Team and Aerial Ace is one thing, but having excellent attack and speed, as well as having Stab on return, is actually just overpowered. I definitely felt like Starly outperformed the Sinnoh starters, but I wonder if that's really what happened. The final time for this run with Starly was 23 hours and 33 minutes, which actually means that it only outperformed one of the Sinnoh starters, that being Chimchar. Even though Starly didn't perform the best out of all the starters, I still felt like this run was a lot easier than I thought it would be, and Starly is certainly a little monster in its own right. Before we end things off here, I want to let you all know that I stream this run over on Twitch, which I plan on doing weekly. Also, if you liked this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe, as it would help me out a lot. I've got new Pokemon challenges coming out weekly, so if you liked this video, there are plenty more to come. If you'd like, feel free to leave a comment to let me know how you feel about the video, since I love seeing what you guys think about my content. If you're interested in hanging out, feel free to follow the link below to either my Twitch, my Discord, or my Twitter, if that platform is still around when you're watching this video. This has been Shro, and thank you for watching.